Two lakes in the Dakotas quietly hold most of the water that keeps the longest river in America alive: Lake Sakakawea and Lake Oahe. Together, they can hold close to 47 million acre-feet, about two-thirds of everything the six-lake system behind them is built to store. Drinking water, power, and barges more than 1,000 miles downstream all lean on these two. So why, in a dry year, are these the lakes that fall first and fall hardest, while the river near the bottom still runs on time? Start with the numbers, because the numbers are doing something strange. Right now, Lake Sakakawea sits at 1,826.8 feet. That is about 27 feet below a full lake, and about 11 feet below the level the Army Corps of Engineers tries to reach every February. Lake Oahe sits near 1,599 feet, more than 20 feet down. The whole main system holds about 48.9 million acre-feet today, around 7 million acre-feet under where the managers want to be. And the snow that is supposed to refill all of it peaked on March 16th, almost a full month early, at less than 80% of normal. But here is the detail that tells the real story. These two lakes are not falling by chance, and they are not falling evenly with everything else. They are being drained on purpose. Sakakawea and Oahe were built to be the basin's backup against exactly this kind of dry year. That is the strange part. The same design that makes them the system's savings also makes them the first accounts the managers empty when the river runs short. In a wet year, nobody notices. In a year like 2026, they take the hit for everyone downstream. So let me show you how the savings get spent and how fast the outlook turns. Start with the outlook, because the outlook is where the quiet part shows up first. In January, the Corps told the basin that 2026 would land near normal. 24.5 million acre-feet of runoff above Sioux City, Iowa, 96% of average. After 2 dry years, that read like the start of a recovery. The long-term average for this basin is about 25.7 million acre-feet, so 96% felt like the river finally coming back. And the early numbers seem to agree. January runoff came in at 1 million acre-feet, 132% of average, above normal in every upper stretch. It looked like a strong start to the year. It was a warning in disguise. That runoff was above average because oddly warm temperatures were melting the plains' snow early, the same early melt that would leave the spring with almost nothing left to give. By February, the outlook slipped to 91%. The Corps put the start-of-season system storage near 49 million acre-feet, more than 7 million acre-feet below the top of what they call the carryover, multiple-use zone, the cushion the whole system is supposed to keep in the bank. Then the mountains stopped helping. By June 3rd, the Corps had cut the 2026 runoff outlook to 15.5 million acre-feet, 60% of average. In 5 months, the outlook fell by more than a third, and almost none of it reached the national news. May runoff alone came in at 1.6 million acre-feet, 46% of average, below normal in every single stretch above Sioux City. The dry side version of their own outlook, the number they keep for the worst case, drops to under 13 million acre-feet for the year. The reason sits in the Rocky Mountains of Montana, where most of this water is born as snow. In a wet year, most of what fills Lake Sakakawea comes off those mountains as melting snow. This year, the mountain snow in the stretches that feed Fort Peck and Sakakawea peaked on March 16th, about a month ahead of a normal year, and it peaked low. 77% of normal in one stretch, 79% in the other. Snow that melts early and runs thin does not refill a lake. It passes through and is gone before the lake can catch it. There is a reason people who live on these lakes have learned to read the runoff report the way a farmer reads the sky. And these two lakes have done this before, lately, which is exactly why the word swing belongs in this story. Watch the runoff numbers move. 2021 was one of the driest years on record for the basin, just 15 million acre-feet. Sakakawea peaked that summer near 1,834 feet and kept sliding into the winter. Then the river bounced partway back. 2022 came in at 19.3 million acre-feet, the 30th lowest in 125 years of records. 2023 reached 20.8. 2024 climbed to 23.3, almost normal, and the lakes came back with it. 2025 fell again to 19.9. And now, 2026 is set at 15.5, right back down near the 2021 low. Up, down, up, down. The two biggest lakes feel that swing most, because they hold the most. They are the part of the system with the most room to fall. Now, zoom out, because the swing only makes sense once you see the whole machine. The Missouri River runs 2,341 miles from the mountains of Montana to its mouth above St. Louis. Control of it began in 1938, when the Corps closed Fort Peck Dam in Montana, the first big dam on the main river. After the floods of the early 1940s, President Roosevelt signed the Flood Control Act of 1944, and the Pick-Sloan Plan was born, named for the two engineers whose flood and water plans Congress stapled together. 6 dams went up across 4 states. The last one, Gavin's Point, closed in 1955. Together, they turned the Upper Missouri into the largest lake system in North America. 6 dams, 6 lakes, lined up down the river from Montana to Nebraska. 3 of them are giants, 3 are small. The giants are Fort Peck in Montana, sitting near 2,223 feet, Lake Sakakawea in North Dakota, and Lake Oahe, which starts at its dam near Pierre, South Dakota, and backs the river up so far that in a full year the lake crosses the state line into North Dakota and reaches almost to Bismarck. Together, those 3 hold most of the 72.4 million acre-feet this system can store when full. The 3 downstream lakes, Big Bend, Fort Randall, and Gavin's Point, are small next to them. Gavin's Point, the last one, is barely a holding tank. It is there to feed water out to the lower river a little at a time. There are no locks anywhere on these dams, which means no barge can climb above Gavin's Point. Everything upstream is storage. Everything downstream is the working river. The managers do not just drain the big 3. They keep moving water between them to keep the 3 about even, so no single lake carries too much of the loss. Heading into 2026, the 3 were already off balance. On March 1st, Fort Peck started the season about 0.2 of a foot low, Garrison about a foot low, and Oahe a little over a foot high. Part of the spring is spent just moving water around the top of the system to even the 3 out before the dry summer pulls them all down together. The size of the top 2 is hard to picture. Lake Sakakawea alone is 178 miles long, with 1,320 miles of shoreline, more coastline than the state of California. At full pool, it covers 307,000 acres. It is the largest lake on the Missouri and the biggest body of water sitting fully inside North Dakota. Lake Oahe runs 231 miles and covers 374,000 acres at full, one of the largest lakes in the whole country. These are not lakes you walk around in an afternoon. These are inland seas. Here is how the machine really works in a dry year, and why the top of it empties first. The Corps does not run these 6 lakes as 6 separate lakes. It runs them as one system with one job at the bottom. Keep enough water moving past Gavin's Point, near the Nebraska and Iowa line, to serve the lower river. Down there, the Corps keeps a barge channel 9 feet deep and 300 feet wide that runs 734.8 miles from Sioux City, Iowa, all the way to the mouth near St. Louis. To hold that channel open at full service, the river has to carry about 31,000 cubic feet per second past Sioux City and Omaha, 37,000 past Nebraska City, and 41,000 past Kansas City. For scale, the Missouri carries about 35,000 cubic feet per second at its mouth on an average day. The whole lower river is built around flows in that range. Flows that in a dry year only exist because the dams upstream are paying them out of storage. Those targets do not move just because it stopped snowing in Montana, so the water to meet them has to come from somewhere. It comes from the savings. Think of the system like the ballast tanks on a ship. To keep the deck level and the ship steady in rough water, the crew floods and drains heavy tanks buried deep in the hull. The lower river is the deck. The big upstream lakes are the ballast. When the basin runs dry, the managers pull water out of the ballast first, Sakakawea and Oahe most of all, to keep the deck level downstream. The deck stays usable. The tanks run low. That is the whole answer to the question we opened with. The river near the bottom can run on time in the very same season. The 2 biggest lakes are dropping toward levels that strand a marina, because the lakes are the ones taking the shock. The system even cycles water through these dams in winter. Every November, the Corps draws the small Gavin's Point pool down to about 1,337.5 feet to make room, and that drop lets Oahe and Big Bend run their turbines through the cold months to make power. The lakes are always working, even when the river looks frozen and still. And the drought pulling at those tanks is not only a rain problem. Daryl Richardson, the North Dakota state climatologist, has said on the record that drought is more than a dry sky, that how fast water dries off and how wet the soil is matter just as much as how much rain falls. A hot, windy summer pulls water straight off the surface of a lake the size of Sakakawea, day after day, with no rain at all. Dry soil drinks whatever rain does fall, before it can ever reach a stream. Richardson has said a soaking rain in the coming weeks would help, in his words, settle things down and replenish the topsoil. The trouble is that a few inches of rain on dried-out ground does almost nothing for a lake that needs millions of acre-feet to recover. The real question is, what happens when the ballast runs low, and the basin asks the tanks to give again anyway? The hits start at the waterline and move outward, and they stack in a set order. First, the shoreline. Lake Sakakawea is the most visited park site in North Dakota, and the dollars behind that are not small. The state's own Commerce Department reported that visitors to the counties around the lake spent more than $290 million in a single recent year. As the water drops, boat ramps end in dry gravel, docks stand over mud, and the walleye and Chinook salmon that draw anglers from across the region get squeezed into a smaller lake. During the last deep drought, the state had to pour low-water concrete ramps all along the shoreline. Some of those ramps, built for a shrunken lake, are showing up again now as the water pulls back from the normal ones. The state's fishing crews have already started reopening those older, low-water ramps for the coming season, the same move they made the last time the lake fell this far. Dave Frieda, the North Dakota Game and Fish Department's Missouri River System supervisor at Riverdale, has put the swing in plain terms. He has said that with lakes like these, too long of any one thing is bad, that a long drought hurts, but steady high water is not good either. A year or two of low water can even help, opening up shoreline that grows the plants young fish need. The danger is the long stretch, the dry years that stack up and do not let go. Colonel Mark Himes, head of the Corps' Omaha district, has said the district is set on improving access as the drought is expected to keep going. Read that again. They are planning around the idea that it keeps dropping. If you are finding this useful, subscribe. We cover water systems, droughts, and the systems holding the country together every week with the full picture you need to actually follow what is going on. So the boat ramps are the easy part. What the upstream towns worry about is the next thing the falling water touches. Second, the intakes. Towns, rural water districts, and businesses pull their drinking and working water through pipes that reach out into these lakes at a set depth. These two lakes are the tap for rural water systems that carry drinking water far out across the dry plains, to ranches and small towns that have no other source within reach. The Corps even sets the smallest hourly releases at Garrison, just because of the intakes sitting downstream of it. When a lake falls far enough, those intakes start sucking air. Across the last drought cycle, towns around both lakes had to extend intakes, drill backup wells, and rework their systems to keep taps running. A lake can be huge and still leave a town dry if the water sits below the pipe that was built to reach it. And that is only round one of the cost. Third, the power. This is where the two lakes quietly matter to people who have never seen them. Oahe Dam is the single biggest power maker in the system. Garrison Dam, holding back Sakakawea, is not far behind. Their power is sold by the Western Area Power Administration, whose Missouri River dams are its second largest source of power, feeding rural electric co-ops, small-town utilities, and tribal nations across the northern plains. Water power runs on the height of the water behind the dam, what engineers call head. As the lakes drop, every turbine makes less power from the same gallon that passes through it. In the deep drought of the early 2000s, Oahe's yearly output fell from a normal of around 2.6 billion kilowatt-hours to about 1.1 billion. Garrison fell to a low near 1.3 billion. To keep its promises to customers when the dams cannot deliver, the Western Area Power Administration has had to buy more than $1.7 billion of replacement power on the open market since 2000. That is the kind of number that makes accountants cry. Every foot these two lakes lose this year is a foot off the head at two of the most important power dams in the region. Fourth, the river itself. The whole point of draining the upper lakes is to keep the lower Missouri moving, and even that has limits. When the runoff outlook falls the way it did this spring, the Corps does not just keep paying out full service downstream. It pulls back, and the way it rations is built in. The barge season opens in spring when Gavin's Point releases climb around the middle of March. Then the Corps reads the system storage on July 1st, and that single number decides how long the season runs and how deep the channel will be backed, anywhere from full service down to the smallest service, thousands of cubic feet per second below it. In a low year, the river gets the shallow version of the season and an early close, and the flow support ends on December 1st at the mouth near St. Louis. After that, releases drop to a winter floor near 12,000 cubic feet per second, and the lakes go quiet for the cold months. The grain, the fertilizer, the fuel that move by water on the lower river all feel a drought that began as snow that never fell on a mountain in Montana. The river is steady at the bottom only because the lakes at the top are not. And this was never really about two lakes. Fifth, the basin. The Missouri drains parts of 10 states, and about 1/6 of the lower United States. As of early June, at least dry to very dry conditions covered about 78% of that basin, with the Dakotas expected to slide deeper into drought through the summer. The same water that parks, power, and barges fight over is also the water that feeds farmland and fills the cattle tanks across the northern plains. Garrison and Oahe were set up to deliver farm water alongside flood control and power. And in a drought, the farming that leans on a high lake is one of the first promises the system cannot fully keep. When the two biggest lakes in that system are 20 and 27 feet down at the same time, every one of those users is drawing from a savings account that is not refilling. None of this is the first time the basin has been tested. The reason these dams exist at all is a drought. In the 1930s, the Dust Bowl turned the northern plains to powder and blowing dirt, ruined farms, and emptied towns. And the floods that came behind it in the 1940s pushed Congress to wall the river off with concrete. Pick Sloan was sold as the thing that would end the cycle of flood and drought for good. It did not. In the system era, two long droughts have tested the design. One ran 6 years, from 1987 to 1992, and it set the record lows that still stand on paper. Lake Oahe fell to 1,580.7 feet in November 1989. Lake Sakakawea hit 1,815 feet in May 1991. Fort Peck bottomed out the same spring. Then a second long drought across the early 2000s pulled Sakakawea even lower, into the range of 1,807 to 1,818 feet, and dropped Oahe so far that the lake pulled back out of North Dakota, leaving more than 60 miles of old lakebed as a thin river through the mud. Both times, the lakes came back. In fact, the river can do the exact opposite extreme. In 2011, runoff hit 61 million acre-feet, the highest ever recorded. And the same dams that ration water in a drought were suddenly dumping it as fast as they safely could to keep from spilling over. Flood, drought, flood, drought. Draw down, wait, refill. That has been the rhythm of this river for as long as the dams have stood. If that pattern still holds, this is just another dry stretch the lakes will climb out of. The question hanging over 2026 is whether it still holds, and whether the gap between the swings is getting shorter, because something is already loading behind this one. The Corps puts it at 82% likely that an El Niño pattern sets up later this year and carries into winter. In this basin, El Niño usually means a warmer, drier, cold season. The storm track's sliding north into Canada and leaving the mountains short on snow. Everything is in place for another thin winter. The system just does not know yet how thin. So the questions stack up. How many below-average years in a row can the managers keep the lower river on time before the upper lakes are simply too low to give? How far can Sakakawea and Oahe fall before the town intakes and the dam turbines start hitting their own floors? And if El Niño does what the odds say it will, what does the spring of 2027 look like for two lakes that are already 20 and 27 feet down before the dry winter even begins? Nobody can answer those yet. The data does not say. What is happening right now is simpler and quieter than any outlook. On the face of Garrison Dam, a gauge reads 1,826.8 feet and ticks down a little every day. Behind it, the largest lake in North Dakota pulls back from its own shoreline an inch at a time, uncovering ramps that were poured for the last drought. And at the base of the dam, the water keeps flowing out, on time, downstream, to keep the river alive for everyone below. The savings account is still open, it is still draining, and the snow that was supposed to refill it never came. Next stage is TTS chunking into labeled segments under 5,000 characters each, broken only at paragraph boundaries. Want me to run that?